Thousands of FPL managers have activated their wildcard going into game week 4, and in this video I'm going to reveal the best wildcard drafts that you can own going into this weekend. And even if you're not on a wildcard, this video is super important to understand the teams and the players that FPL managers are buying. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do drop a like, aiming for 400 on this video. And of course, if you're not already, make sure you do smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. We are so close to 18,000 subscribers. I can taste it. So enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, before we can even consider building a wildcard team, it is so important to understand the fixtures that we need to target, because end of the day, fixtures are king. Yes, there are some teams that kind of are the exception, like a Man City or an Arsenal, but when we are looking to fill our teams, we want to really bring in the players that have great upcoming fixtures. So we've got the fixture ticker here for the next 6 game weeks after game week 4. And as you can see at the top, Brighton being top of the ticker with Ipswich at home and Nottingham Forest at home. I think if you're wildcarding in game week 4, it is super important to have a double up on them. I know game week 6 and 7 are not ideal, but I think the 2 fixtures coming up are just too good to ignore in your teams. And of course, we will come on to the specific players to target in a minute after this section. Aston Villa are another interesting team to consider. The thing that you need to note about Aston Villa is, of course, the return of the Champions League. And it's the first time Aston Villa have been in this competition for God knows how long. So they're going to be fielding their best 11 in the midweek games. How is that going to impact their minutes in the Premier League? That is not to be known right now. But I do think it is a slight consideration that we need to have. It won't impact game week 4, but game week 5 onwards is where we could see some impact on those minutes. For example, a Morgan Rogers, who's been playing 90 minutes each and every week. Could we maybe see his minutes prioritised in the Champions League and then a little bit risk in the Premier League? Again, we need to assess that situation. But with those fixtures, it feels only right to have at least one Aston Villa, if not 2, in your team to target. Brentford are a really interesting one because the time to strike is not right now with Man City and Spurs, but this is why it's really important to understand the fixtures and your future plans, because if you're planning to wildcard in game week 4, bringing someone like an Mbeumo in your team doesn't really make a lot of sense. But when you see the game week 6 fixtures and beyond, West Ham, Wolves, Man United and Ipswich, you need to have a plan in place in order to bring in these Brentford assets if you're not going to do so in a game week 4 wildcard. And that's why I think it's really important to understand what kind of structure you want in your team. And again, we will touch on the Brentford players in my upcoming wildcard drafts. A few of the notable teams, I think Crystal Palace with someone like an Eze is a player that you just keep long term if you are going to bring him into a wildcard team. The talisman on all set pieces, he is kind of fixture proof as an example. And importantly as well, if you're wildcarding in game week 4, Man City is the really interesting one because it feels a week too early to avoid them with Brentford at home. But then with Arsenal and Newcastle back to back after that, one would argue it is an opportunity to swing against those assets. But of course, we're going to come on to the teams. If you are brave enough to go without Haaland, it will give you a lot of budget. But are you really that brave to go without him at home against Brentford? I think most of the people are going to answer no to that question. Again, Arsenal in game week 4 as a wildcard is a brilliant opportunity to go against the other managers. A few managers who are wildcarded later on may keep their Arsenal players, but with Spurs and Man City away, it does feel like a great opportunity to maybe go against Arsenal assets. But if you are going to do that in a wildcard 4, you then need to understand that game week 6 onwards, the fixtures are brilliant with Leicester, Southampton and Bournemouth. So again, if you're going to avoid Arsenal, you need to have a plan in place to not only bring in maybe Brentford players in game week 6, but also Arsenal players in game week 6. And there lies a problem with the wildcard strategy. You have to either commit with Arsenal throughout this period or ensure you have enough free transfers in game week 6 to bring these players back in. Because while no player is essential, I can't really imagine not having in the Arsenal players for that game week 6 and 7 fixture. Outside of this, Liverpool we know are a team we have to pile into for a wildcard 4 strategy. Otherwise, I think the rest of the teams are up for grabs, which we are going to touch on now in the next wildcard teams. So the first of 3 wildcard teams that I want to show you is going to be a traditional Erling Haaland and Mo Salah draft. Now, just to quickly touch on those right now, because of course that is going to be something that is a hot topic right now. You do not have to have both of these players in your teams. I've seen so many fantastic managers out there with brilliant scores already in the opening 3 game weeks avoid Haaland or avoid a Mo Salah. So if you're wildcarding in game week 4, you do not need both of these. However, both are offering still incredible FPL value. I know that you're spending a quarter of the budget on these 2 players, but Mo Salah, I still think in himself is the best Liverpool asset because his minutes are pretty good in comparison to Diaz's and Jota's, and being the penalty taker, very difficult to ignore Mo Salah, even though there are alternatives in that Liverpool team to a Luis Diaz and a Diogo Jota. I'll just be a little bit concerned that Salah is getting close to 90 minutes every game, and if you have the opportunity to wildcard him in with these opening fixtures, I think it's a very difficult one to ignore. Now, Erling Haaland is the one that is splitting a lot of conversation right now, and it's worth noting, if you were to go without one of them, I do think it maybe is an opportunity to go without Erling Haaland for a couple of game weeks. I know it sounds controversial, but with Erling Haaland, game week 4, fantastic at home against Brentford, but after that, 2 trickier fixtures in games that he has struggled in the past. I do think if you want to be a little bit different, you could go without Erling Haaland. But again, we will touch on a draft like that in a minute. For me, I do think if you're wildcarding in game week 4, Salah and Haaland is very difficult to ignore. And I still think you can build good drafts. So just going through the team you can see on your screens right now. I've gone for Henderson in goal at 4.5 million. I think with the inclusion of Trevor Chalobah at Crystal Palace and the Wolfsburg centre-back that has been brought in, I think we will see a bit more of a stability at Crystal Palace in the upcoming game weeks. While the fixture isn't great for Crystal Palace, maybe this week and beyond, I do think for game week 4 in isolation at home against Leicester, it is a good opportunity for a clean sheet. Fabianski at 4 million is a great enabler, especially with the injury to Areola. We don't know a status on that right now, but I do think that is an opportunity to jump on a 4 million goalkeeper that hasn't emerged right now. In terms of the defenders, I'm going to be honest, these defenders are going to be in each and every wildcard that I've built, apart from a slight variation in Trent, because of course, being the most expensive at 7 million, we do have to use him as a bit of a cash cow if we're going to change the wildcard team. So I'm going to put a bit of a rotation planner here, just to give you an idea on what you could do with your team if you wanted to, based on the difficulty of fixture. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. If you're going to have Trent in your team, you are just going to play him in each and every game week. So while, for example, in game week 7, it's suggested to bench Trent, there's no world that I'm benching Trent away against Crystal Palace and starting Concert at home against Man United. So only use this as a reference point right now, and you can see how you would navigate this team. But realistically, you're going to play a 3 at the back. And I think with the combination of players that we have here, you could play Dunk for the opening 2 game weeks that they have brilliant fixtures. Concert could come in for some great games where there are some other tricky games for the likes of Man City. Trent, as I mentioned, will start every game. Robinson offers the perfect balance of potential clean sheets, but also attacking returns. And of course, Rico Lewis, a really interesting one right now, and he's going to remain in all of the wildcard drafts that I show you. He is a risk, of course, with the Champions League returning. Maybe Pep looks at Rico as his #1 right back, so we could see some minutes for Walker in the Premier League when the Champions League returns. But if you're wildcarding right now, I think this is just too good of an opportunity to own Rico Lewis. And if you avoid him, then I think there could be problems later down the line. Now, in terms of the midfield, of course, we got Mo Salah. We got Matoma in for those next few game weeks. I think if anybody's going to play significant minutes in the Brighton team, I do think it will be Matoma. I think he's more of the senior player in those wide areas. And I think Adingra and Minter will probably share the minutes out wide. Matoma should keep his spot on that left wing. And I think even though his shot volume has been quite low, I really do like him for the next 2 game weeks. We spoke about Eze. I think when we're looking at guaranteed minutes, talismanic figure, on set pieces, they don't come much better than Eze. So he is going to be in the team. Now, the big thing about this team right now is that we have got a rotation of some cheap enablers, which is worth noting. So what we have right now is the inclusion of Semenyo, João Pedro, and Morgan Rogers. Now, with this team that we have, I do think it is an opportunity to fleet between a front 2 and a midfield 4. So some weeks you'll play a 3-5-2. Other weeks you can play a 3-4-3. And that will depend on the fixtures. I'm going to put a bit of a rotation planner here. Again, taking into account João Pedro, Semenyo, and Morgan Rogers. If we were to look at game week 4, you would most likely play João Pedro and Morgan Rogers, and you could bench Semenyo playing a 3-4-3 formation. However, come game week 6, for example, where João Pedro is away against Chelsea, you could easily play Morgan Rogers away against Ipswich and Semenyo at home against Southampton. And again, in game week 7, you could, if you wanted to, bench one of João Pedro and Morgan Rogers while keeping Semenyo in the team. I think there are some real good value players in the game, and understanding the ones that are going to get guaranteed minutes are really, really important. Because even though the likes of Smith Rowe are brilliant options, I'm not denying it, I think right now after 3 game weeks, if you're wildcarding in a game week 4, you need to understand you're only going off 2 or 3 game weeks worth of information, so it isn't a lot. So I think understanding the players that play regular minutes is really important, especially if you're building a wildcard team where you don't want to be making loads and loads of transfers in future weeks. Now, to conclude the wildcard draft here, of course, we've got Erling Haaland. We've gone for Havertz, quite interestingly. Now, I've seen a lot of drafts, and we're going to come on to another one in a minute, where it dead ends the 3rd forward spot. But right now, I've brought in Kai Havertz. I do think with Arsenal's fixtures, yes, the next 2 are tricky, but are there not goals in the Arsenal-Spurs games? We have seen that in the past, and I think Havertz has absolutely established himself as the number 9 in this Arsenal team. And I think Havertz could actually be just a great long-term hold for your team. And what it's going to do as well is prevent a future transfer in your team when the game week 6 fixture swing happens. So you could go for somebody like a dead end forward, which we will come on to the pros and cons, or you could go to someone like a Muniz if you wanted to, but why not just get the guy who was playing number 9 in one of the best teams in the league? Yes, they got tricky games, but do we foresee Arsenal not winning or scoring goals? No, I think Arsenal will get positive results. So for that reason, if they're going to get positive results, we got to get the guy who is being directly involved in a lot of goals, and that is going to be Kai Havertz right now. And as I mentioned, I think it will stop you making a future transfer where they are so precious after using a wildcard. So that's going to be the first team, a Haaland Salah draft. The big problem with this team, of course, is that when we get to game week 6, when the fixture swing happens for Arsenal, very, very difficult with us having Mo Salah and then the next most expensive being Eze. No real premium alongside that to allow us to jump between fixtures if we choose to. And that inflexibility in the team is my major concern going with a premium forward. So next up I want to show you a draft which does include a premium forward and a slight tweak in how this team is set up. So next up we have a draft here which basically is Haaland and Salah but also includes Cole Palmer in it. So the rest of the structure pretty much takes the same shape. However, the tweaks. We have downgraded Trent to Robinson. Unfortunately, we don't have the cash available. But I do think Robinson is offering a nice alternative to Trent. Now, let's be real. I do think for those that haven't had Trent have been a little bit fortunate. There have been big returns there. They just haven't really come. And to be honest, I do expect something to happen with Trent Alexander-Arnold in the next 5 or 6 game weeks. A double-digit return or at least one monster haul. Do I see that with Robinson? Not necessarily as highly as that of Trent Alexander-Arnold. So you are taking a risk going with Robertson, but can Robertson deliver attacker returns? Absolutely. Are his minutes locked in? Yes. I think he's a good option at 6 million. And if you do need to make a slight tweak to the team, even though Trent is ideal, and I would really try and urge you to try and get him in, if you are making a tweak, I actually don't mind the move at all. I think he offers a lot of that Alexander-Arnold does. Just doesn't have that X factor in the final third, but you know what you're getting with Robertson each and every week. In terms of the midfielders, again, the structure stays the same, but what we have done is made a huge upgrade and done Semenyo to Cole Palmer and then downgraded Kai Havertz to basically a dead spot in the team of Stewart at 4.5 million. Now, the first thing we need to note is if you're going down this strategy of having a dead spot, basically where he's going to be third on your bench each and every game week, you need to ensure that the other 14 players are playing players that you viably can have in your team. I've seen a few people have maybe a 4 million defender that is very, very at risk of rotation. You can't afford to do that. If you're going to allocate one of your 15 players to basically be a dead spot, you need to make sure that the rest of them can come in at any point. That is why we have got a very strong defence in terms of fixed minutes, because at any moment those can come into the team and we don't have to worry about minutes. That's so important. So the big thing here, of course, is that we're bringing Cole Palmer in at the expense of a Kai Havertz. I really do like this structure, I'm going to be honest with you, because I think the midfielders are where the true value is this season. And if you're going to have Mo Salah in your team, I think it's going to be very difficult if you wildcard to move away from him. And equally, if you've got Erling Haaland in your team in a wildcard 4, I think it's a very brave move for you to keep Haaland for 1 week and then sell him to then bring him back in game week 6 when the fixtures are phenomenal, or game week 6, 7 onwards for Man City. You need him over that period. If you wildcard him in, sell him, and then bring him back in, it is just a complete waste of time. And you might as well build a wildcard team without Erling Haaland in, which we will come on to in a minute. So what I love about this draft in particular is that you are bringing in that other premium midfielder, which is going to allow you to easily navigate to other midfielders when you choose. So for example, Cole Palmer over the next 2 game weeks, you can keep into your team. I have no concerns that he will get some sort of attack in return. But then when we get to game week 6, if Cole Palmer is not living up to the expectation, and of course Arsenal come into those brilliant fixtures, such an easy move for you to do Cole Palmer to a Bukayo Saka and get yourself a piece of that Arsenal attack in a very, very easy way. You're not having to completely rip up the team, sacrifice money in one player to do so. And I think in terms of a future planning move, that is actually the better structure that I would go for, just because we know inevitably those fixtures are coming. And who would I rather have, Kai Havertz or Saka? For me, it still is Bukayo Saka, even though Kai Havertz is offering fantastic value. So let me know your thoughts on the comments on this particular draft. I really do like it. And if you do also agree that the value is in midfield, then maybe go down this direction is the route to go for. But there's one more draft I want to show you. And spoiler alert, it has no Erling Haaland, but it might be for some managers out there. So lastly, we have a wildcard team with no Erling Haaland. Yes, you heard that right, no Erling Haaland. But as I said, there are lots of variations that we can do this season. We're not completely wedded to particular players. So I wanted to show you what you could build without Erling Haaland. I know it's a scary prospect, but we know the fixtures in game week 5 and 6 are tricky. So there is some sort of argument there. So in terms of what we have done with this team, a few changes. We've upgraded Henderson to Raya. I think it's really important that if you are going to go without Erling Haaland, you need to start building transfers in the bank beyond this point. Because if you're going to go down this route, I think if you need to go back to Erling Haaland, you don't want to be taking a -4, -8, -12 to bring him back in. So the sooner you can start to have future-proofed players, the better. So Raya is one of those. Yes, the next 2 fixtures aren't great, but could Arsenal keep a clean sheet? Absolutely. And then game week 6 onwards, the fixtures are great. So you know you're going to want Raya long-term regardless. So why not just bring him in a wildcard team for game week 4 onwards? In terms of the defenders, pretty much the same structure. But again, if you are going without Haaland, you've got to try and spend the money. So Trent is in at 7 million. That is a no-brainer. And you could even argue you could upgrade one of these areas to a Pedro Porro. But if we've got a piece of the Arsenal defence, we've got a piece of the Liverpool, and we've got a piece of the Man City, I think we are pretty well-rounded in this game week 4 wildcard team. So I like the sprinkling of the 4.5 millions that we already have in this team. In terms of the midfielders, Salah remains, Morgan Rogers remains. Of course, we have to have a premium midfielder, and it is going to be Cole Palmer in game week 4. But again, it allows you to navigate to other premium midfielders when you want to. The big thing about this is we can have 2 mid-price midfielders alongside it. Eze, as I mentioned, is a brilliant talisman, but as I spoke about, trying to future-proof your team, Mbeumo is a perfect example of that. When we get to game week 6, this is a player that you're going to want in your team regardless. Next 2 fixtures are not ideal, I get it, but I still think Mbeumo could deliver in those fixtures. And you know from game week 6 onwards, you are then just basically not having to use a transfer in your team. So again, if you're going without Haaland, this is a great opportunity to bring him in longer term for your side. So I love the idea of having Mbeumo in alongside Eze. And again, if you need to jump between players, you have the price point that allows you to do so. Finally, the front 3. Now, Watkins has been a slight concern, especially with his minutes, playing just under 70 each and every week. But with him, with the brilliant fixtures, it is a great opportunity for maybe those managers that are a little bit scared to go there. You can jump on it and hopefully catch the hot streak that he inevitably will get at some point. You know you're taking a risk with Champions League, but I still think Watkins is a brilliant option for your teams. Havertz is in. Again, when we talk about future-proofing your team, he is a brilliant example of that for game week 6 onwards. And João Pedro, once again, there are a few concerns about obviously going off of the Brazilian team, but unless we hear clarification that he's not an option, still think he is the budget forward to go to. So I actually don't hate this team at all. Do you not have a Haaland? Of course you don't have Haaland, but is he overperforming? Absolutely, with back-to-back hat-tricks. He's not going to get that each and every game week. And if you are one of those managers that is looking to really optimize your team, I actually think this gets the best of both worlds. You get great coverage in teams for long-term periods, which will then allow you to keep free transfers in the bank for if the moment happens where you have to bring Haaland in, you can do some minor surgery with the team without having to take loads of points hit. So please let me know in the comment section if you like this team. The more I look at it, the more I think to myself, I don't think I'm brave enough to go there, but I absolutely understand why managers are looking to go for a team like this. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope it provided some value, even if you are or not on a wildcard. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section when you're planning on doing your wildcard, and what is your current wildcard draft if you've activated it already. As always, if you enjoyed it, make sure you drop a like and smash that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Cheers.